are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, clients and trading reps. Welcome to our Monday weekly webinar where we'll give the market outlook and talk about some stock or two. Thanks for attending. Okay, let's begin. Usual disclaimers. I'll start with macro conditions. As you may have heard last week, when we're rather positive about the second half outlook of the global economy, and this continues to be the case. So last week, U.S. new orders for capital goods, non-defense, excluding aircraft, came out and was a good result, and you can see that the trend is firmly on the upside here. Okay, so businesses are investing for the future, and I think this bodes well. This is, to us, the strongest indicator that second half of the U.S. will be doing well. Now, for the chart below, which is China's industrial profit, we've turned positive, actually. It's a 10% year-on-year growth for China's industrial profit, which I think is a good sign amongst all the terrible data we've been getting from China lately. EU industrial production for capital goods is also trending towards the positive, and Japanese machine orders, as we mentioned last week, has been strongly rebounding. Now in Singapore, last week we had industrial production. Okay, so excluding biomed, which is very volatile, we are also moving towards the positive side. And I think for Singapore, you just have to look at the overall global trend. And from my first slide, you can see that if the global economy is going to do well in the second half, then I don't see any reason why Singapore's industrial production will not be in the same direction. Now, the outlook for markets, I think afterwards our market analysts will tell you that we may have a short-term correction, okay, but on the longer-term trends, we are still positive. Leading economic indicators are still encouraging us, as I've mentioned. Now, one of the things to look forward, two of the things to look forward this week is that the Fed will meet on Tuesday and Wednesday to discuss policy, and I think it will be just a reiteration of what they've been saying before, right? That Fed policy is predicated on economic indicators. What are they telling us, right? And for our analysis, I think actually the risks that we'll have an early tightening of QE is a greater risk than a delay. Okay, we have the leading indicators doing well, and actually employment numbers for the U.S. economy have also been pretty robust. So that brings me to point number 3, is that this Friday there will be a print on U.S. jobs data, and I think we'll be somewhere in the 200,000 range. Okay, bullish, major trend lines are still bullish, and those are still in force. And while the indices are challenging, however, on a short-term basis, I think we may see some challenges, which my market analysts will now elaborate on. Thanks.
Okay, so complementing the economic update, we shall have a market update. Okay, so here's the market data for the S&P, and as you can see, as my colleague mentioned earlier, the uptrend is still in force. The S&P is still trading in this nice up channel over here. However, we note that on this weekly chart, the RSI is close to overbought and might be diverging in price. Okay. For the daily chart, as you zoom in, we also see that the RSI for the daily chart is also close to overbought, and the MACD is hinting at a cycle turn, but this has to be confirmed by price action before we can say it's a cycle down. When we look at price itself, we see how the S&P has broke its one-year high, and as symbolized by this red resistance line. The prices broke up And so far it has retraced downwards, and we are still at this point above this red support line. So we need to see if price can actually hold above the support line. If so, then this implies a further upside. If not, then this might be the start of a cycle down. It is encouraging, however, that on Friday, price did look as though it was going to break down, but clawed its way back up to positive territory to 1691. Okay. However, as we noted earlier, that conditions may be right for some sort of correction, but price has to confirm it. Another reason is because when we look at the market sector analysis, we see that for the last 2 weeks, even though the S&P has grinded slowly higher, we note that most of this grind is a significant portion of this grind is due to healthcare, the healthcare sector going up, whereas technology and cyclicals actually did not participate in this rise. So this gives a hint at potential market weakness. A broad look at 4 major indices will show that yes, we are still on uptrends for the S&P, the STI, Hang Seng Composite, and the CSI 300. But we note that a few of the indices are actually trading. Their price is very close to this trend line, and which is a key technical level which we have to monitor. In general, for last week, most of the indices were more or less unchanged. The S&P, the STI, and the Hang Seng over here just increased by less than 1%, whereas the CSI 300 decreased by less than 1% as well. So for the Nikkei does have a bearish configuration. As you can see, there has been a gap down in this daily chart over here, this gap down here. So we do expect weakness for this week for the Nikkei. A potential support zone, a major support zone, is this clustering of a consolidated cluster of this consolidation price pattern here. So if for this week, if there is weakness, we expect this to be some support. So this zone is between 12,500 and 13,500. The Hang Seng has a bullish configuration. On the weekly chart, we are still above this blue uptrend. At the same time, if you look at the daily chart, we see that yes, indeed, price has managed to break out of this resistance line over here, given by this blue line here, and so far it's been staying above. So that's a bullish configuration. For Thailand, we do have an intact uptrend. However, Thailand is the price of Thailand is actually at a key support level. If you look into the daily, we see that price had broken out from this W bottom over here, and so far, so it's broken out, but yet it has corrected. But it has retraced back down, right back to the same support resistance level that it broke out from. So we need to actually keep our eyes on this level to see if this support zone can actually hold. So if this holds, then we do expect price to make its way to a target of around 1550 to 1575. Of course, if it cannot rebound off this level, right, then this objective will be null and void and implies for the downside. For the JKT Composite Index, it's roughly the same story. We do have a long-term uptrend. However, the price is at key support levels. As you can see, we had a breakout of this downtrend, short-term downtrend is broken up. Price has retraced since the breakout point back to this key support level. So we want to see whether this can bounce off or whether this downtrend will continue. The KLCI, it has a bullish configuration. There's no correction in sight. However, we are at overbought levels in the RSI. Okay, finally for the for the STI weekly, we see that price is still negotiating at the resistance of the 260, which you mentioned a few weeks ago. So since then, price actually had surged from this low of about 3,110 to 3,259 before stalling. And now that it has stalled, we see on the weekly that there's formed inverted hammer pattern. So this does hint of short-term weakness when you have an inverted hammer. Okay, so we need to look at this level as well. If there is a leg down, if there is, the first objective and key support zone is between the 2930 and 3110 region, which is essentially this support zone over here, which is a confluence of a lot of supports. You have the consolidation levels of here and here. At the same time, this region is also the 50% retracement level of this whole move, 50%. And at the same time, this level here is also, for this move over here, from the downtrend from March to July, if there's a retracement from here, if you take this as an objective, right, you hit this level as well. You hit the 100% to 0.619 a percentage retracement of this move itself. Okay. However, we do have to see whether price price can recover and break above this blue line. So we need to actually take a look at this for this week. When you look into the daily chart, we see it more closely. So right now, we are actually consolidating within two important key technical levels right now. So if price can break above this resistance of 32.77, that will imply a greater upside to probably 34.50. Okay. However, if price breaks below the level of 32.05, then the upside objective is negated, and we can expect further downside. So in summary, the short-term outlook is as follows. For these indices, the S&P is at key support, but it is overbought. The STI is testing key support. HSI typo is bullish. The KLCI is grinding higher. But for the China index, the Thai index, and Jakarta Composite Index, these are all testing important key supports, where the Nikkei is bearish. So we think that even though markets can still go up on the longer term, but we may have to be cautious because short-term indicators seem to be ripe for a cycle down, but we need to wait for price to confirm by failure to hold those key support levels that we talked about earlier. Okay. For the intermarket and sector analysis, we just note for the three major asset classes, treasury prices, S&P prices, and industrial commodity prices. Story is about the same as the week before. Treasury prices has been on an uptrend, but it has shown a significant weakness since a few months ago. Okay, so now we are waiting for the resolution of this pattern over here, this flag pattern, to see which way that treasuries might be going. Stocks are continued uptrend, and we believe that commodities are still consolidating. When we look deeper into the daily charts, we see that yes, indeed, treasuries since May has been on a downtrend. It has hinted of reversing the downtrend here in the middle of July. But since then, price has not confirmed the reverse in trend, and we want to see whether the price can actually break out of this 127 level before we say there's a change in trend. So at this point, the change in trend is not confirmed, so we still are on a downtrend, in my opinion. S&P is still on an uptrend. Commodities is also on a key technical support level. Since breaking out at about 636 in early July, since breaking out of this consolidation pattern, we've actually retraced all the way back to this key support line. And so we need to see if this key support line will hold before we can say that commodities has another leg up or not. So at this point, we have to monitor commodities as well. But based on the existing evidence, we still have to conclude that we are still at stage 4 of the business cycle, which means we expect on the longer term that bonds will be weak and stocks and commodities still have legs to run. And stage 4 on the investment wheel over here will be around this part over here. So we still expect growth in stocks and commodities at this point. Okay, and now I shall hand you over to the analyst covering Boustead.
Hi. Joshua here, covering Boustead. Okay, so we initiated on Boustead actually sometime in February, and the price at that time was around there, 127. We're at 147 right now. Okay, so we had a nice run up, consolidation, and we're having a nice run up again. I just want to recap on the business model for Boustead. I think that's really important to understand. It's got three main businesses, which is the first one of which is energy-related engineering business segment, which is 13% of profit before tax. This segment deals with direct-fired heat processes and waste heat recovery. Basically, the direct-fired heat processor is the actual unit that cracks oil and natural gas into the constituent compounds that we use. And so it's at the heart of the refining process. And that process is energy intensive, and the waste heat generated from that is cycled back into the plant. So that's where the waste heat recovery units come in. So Boustead is one of 4 players globally, and that is, I think that's a nice niche business. Okay, industrial real estate solutions, which is over here, is Boustead's biggest earnings driver at nearly 60% of PBT. Basically, it runs a full turnkey business, which is in the industrial real estate segment. So it can take, in terms of designing and building industrial real estate, it can do it all the way from conceptualization, architecture, industrial design, project management of the construction, TOP, hand it back to the client, right? So it's a full turnkey, and there are only 3 companies in the region that do this. The other 2 are Ascendus and Bovis. So in this rather competitive space, I think these 3 are the market leaders. Boustead also runs a buy and lease back program whereby it actually buys the property that it's constructing for the client and leases it back to them. And from this angle, it is amassing an industrial portfolio, property portfolio, which it is looking to REIT and unlock the value. And that partly explains why the share price has been running up. Geospatial technology is 30% of profit before tax, and later on I will describe that business. Water and waste treatment plants is a small part of the business, 1% PBT, and is a very competitive business. We will not touch on that one today. Okay. Okay, now let's go on to industrial design and build and lease. At the end of the last financial year, which is March, Boustead guided that the design and build business outlook was going to be subdued due to keener competition. At the year start, order book backlogs actually dipped year on year from 197 to 174 million. But since then, orders have far exceeded expectations. There was a single order of 100 mil to build Seagate's latest R&D center at Fusionopolis, right, which boosted the order backlog to a record 274 million. So what was looking to be a subdued year for industrial design and build has turned out to be a sterling year. And I think this is pretty much to do with the fact that Boustead is not your standard contractor, right? It's full turnkey capability, as I described before. And that always puts it as a strong contender, okay? It also specializes in building facilities for high value-added MNC requirements, Bell Helicopter, Rolls-Royce, Kerry Logistics, Jabil, Seagate, Fortis. And this gels with the larger trend, which is Singapore's march up the industrial value chain. Now we move on to the catalyst, okay, for the stock, which is that currently it's got a portfolio of 101,000 square meters, which works out to be over 1 million square feet of industrial portfolio. Now, a ballpark market value of 172 million is probably too low because I did a quick check on industrial property PSFs, and they're about 300 to 400 mil. Okay, so it's going to be, that's actually about half the market cap right now. So this 23% of market cap I put here is actually in relation to the 172 initial valuation, which is really far too low. And I think half the market cap is might actually be realized if the REIT plans go through. And those plans are already in motion with the incorporation of a trust and fund management subsidiary. and the design, build, and lease model that they have would be greatly enhanced by a REIT to absorb the properties. Okay, so when the announcement came out for the trust and fund management subsidiaries, that's when the price started to rally again. So I think the market is definitely looking out for that. Okay, now for energy-related engineering, this was the business that was poised to do very well at the start of the financial year, and this continues to be the case. So one of the beauties about Boustead is because it's got 4 main business units at any one time, right? Something is doing well, even if something else is not. But this year, I think we have, we're going to see both these major, rather more cyclical businesses do well, right? For the industrial portfolio and also the energy. Okay, so order backlogs have surged 110 mil to 174 year on year. This is largely due to the fact that quite a few refining assets are coming online in the world outside of the Middle East, okay, where margins have been squeezed at the sub-con level because at the main con level, the Koreans have entered the market and are basically engaging in a bidding war with the other main cons. Okay, so Boustead's margins also suffered because of that price war. However, now we're moving off the focus from the Middle East to the US, European Union, and Asia, where margins are much better. So if I may go back to the slide here, if you look at margins for the last financial year, they actually rose. It bottomed out previously from 10.7 to 11.2. So we've kind of maintained that expectation. Because actually this number, this final year number, was greatly boosted by the last quarter when they booked in orders outside of the Middle East. So we could have some upside risk for the margins this year, assuming that the trend continues. Okay, so we're thankful that this sector is going to offset any pressures on the real estate segment that we thought in the beginning, but now it's looking like both are going to do well. And one of the trends that Boustead is riding on is actually the U.S. shale gas boom, right? And they won a $39 million contract for that. Okay, so this is the next business is the Geospatial, and the Geospatial, if I may go back to the old slides, the previous slide again, has extremely regular profit growth. Okay, so we've seen it move every year, adding about 3 million. It's kind of like almost about 10% year on year steady profit growth with extremely high margins. Now, the reason why it's got such high margins is because the geospatial information system that Boustead distributes is an exclusive agreement with the maker of it, which is Esri, an American company. Exclusive agreement in Australia, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Brunei. And not only that, if I may go down to the point down here, Esri commands a 41% global market share, 61 global market share by public sector, and the number 2 is a distant 10%. Okay, so they're basically marketing the gold standard in global geographic information system made by the global market leader. So what is a GIS? GIS is basically a technology-enabled map such that all the objects on the map can be populated by quantitative and qualitative data, in which case you can do lots of analysis. Right, so an example is PUB, which operates a network of three networks of piping, water provision, sewerage, and rainwater, right, across 3 separate departments. Okay, so they had difficulties integrating the 3 plans. So under Esri, they've done that, right? All 3 plans can be centralized onto one software, and and when you populate all the assets in there with data, you can manage it better. You can do better planning and analysis, field mobility, operating awareness, stakeholder engagement as well. Right, so Esri actually has been implemented in Australia since 2002 and it is being driven across the entire government. That's why Australia still drives growth for this segment after 10 years, right? And basically, as more and more departments use it, more and more users use it, there's more and more consulting, more and more training, more and more after-sales service. The more you use, the more you pay. So that's my last point here, okay? And therefore, you can see, you can have a feel of why year-on-year growth for that is so strong. Now, in Singapore, most government agencies and stat boards have used it. It's used for the master plan that most of you have probably seen. In Malaysia and Indonesia, since 2011, the governments there have instituted that everyone has to get on ESRI from now on, okay, so that they can have a centralized planning service. So this rides on to the trend of the secular trend of data-driven decision making, and I think this is a really good business of Boustead's because the agreements are exclusive. ESRI and Boustead have an exclusive agreement in pretty much 4 major countries. And I would say Malaysia and Indonesia have yet to realize the full potential. Right. We have a buy in Boustead, so our target price is at 193. Earnings is going to slightly dip from last year. This is because last year had quite a few one-off items. Okay, so but if you normalize it, well, I think we're going to hit about 14 over cents this year. They pay very good dividend, about, well, sometimes even more than 50%. Okay, the average I remember calculating over the last 5 years was about 50% of earnings is paid out. Okay, this is because Boustead has very good cash flows. If you look at this panel over here, cash flow from operations is pretty close to the profit before tax, right? It's got a very efficient cash conversion business. And the capex is extremely light. As you can see, it's like 5 million, 6 million compared to that kind of operating cash flow. So the free cash flow is extremely huge, right? And it can very comfortably pay out even more than 50% if it wishes to. However, that's the average ratio that it has maintained, and from what we understand, management is looking to conserve cash to expand the industrial portfolio. Right, now let me go back to this point. The current market cap is 737. The industrial portfolio may be realized at 173 million, but like as we said, that's extremely conservative, more likely 300 to 400 million, and we still have some we still have the current order book that may be chucked in there as well. Okay, net cash position is 226 million. So you take the cash, you minus off you add the liquid securities, and you less off all the debt, right? And then you take the market cap, you minus off the industrial portfolio valuation 173, you minus off the cash, you get the rest of the business valued at 338 million, or an estimated 5 times PE. So I think this is extremely good value. I mean, it's terribly undervalued from this perspective. And it's pretty much unlocked because of the plans to do a REIT. So from our perspective, it looks like a value buy with a clear catalyst going forward. So thank you, and we can take your questions right now. Oh, we have a question here. Who are the other 3 players in what Boustead is doing? Okay, Boustead, well, the 3 players are Boustead itself, Bovis, and Ascendus. Okay, so when I say, actually, what I mean is that there are many players doing this, but there are only 3 which have full turnkey capability. Okay, so that means conceptualize, architecture, industrial design, construction project management, TOP, hand it back to the client. Okay, there are only 3 players who can do it end to end. Any other questions? Okay, what caused the stock price to move up between 18 and 22nd July? Yeah, that's the reason is because they've announced that they've incorporated a trust and fund management company. So that's a strong signal that they want to REIT the portfolio, the industrial portfolio. And there was also a article from in The Edge magazine which highlighted this point. Actually, this plans to do the industrial portfolio REIT is years old already. They have flagged it before, right? But I think the market now knows that they're serious because they incorporated the entities. Major shareholder is Mr. Wong Fong Fui, who owns about, I think, 30% of the stock. Okay, valuation of Boustead compared to peers. Unfortunately, there aren't any peers in the sense that Ascendus's design, build, and lease business is privately held, right? And the Geospatial segment is also privately held. Yep. So when I look at the valuation from Boustead, I'm mainly looking from a cash flow a free cash flow point of view. I mean, with that much cash coming into the company, 5 times PE is just ridiculously low, really, with that kind of efficiency. Okay, we have a question from the floor on Mr. Wong Fong Fui's succession plan. He is in his 50s, and he has his sons in the company, right? So he is his eldest son is an executive director already. Yeah. Oh, good question here. About the Australian company that was mining magnesium, that they bought a huge share in it. Yes. So they highlighted that they were first very enthusiastic about this project, but they realized that they had that the management of that company was not really taking in their input, and so they felt that it was turning out to be a risk instead, and they just liquidated it basically. So they had a exit strategy, and they liquidated it, got all their money back and a little bit more. Okay, with another question, almost certain rise in the interest rates, how would this affect Boustead's REIT plans? I think you have highlighted a very good question because, and it is a cause for concern because, if interest rates rise, I think any fixed income or fixed income quasi asset like a REIT is going to be affected. So I think they have pretty much a year to do it, right? I think by 2014, the end of 2014, we might see our first rate hike from the US, and I think if they want to do anything, they should try and do it before then. So, we have a question here that the portfolio size might not be big enough. So I think you're right. It is at this point not big enough. However, they do have some major projects on hand, which I think will be added to the REIT. So we had a discussion with some of the more experienced people in the firm as well, and I think currently it's looking like a 500 million market cap, given the projects on hand and the current portfolio. 500, I think, is not fantastically huge, but it's not negligibly small as well. What is the projected price target? I have 193, but actually it doesn't price in the realization of the REIT, of the industrial portfolio at all. Okay, thanks for the questions, and we look forward to meeting you again next Monday. Thank you, and that's the end of the seminar.